The cruiser's lights painted the empty street in stuttering red and blue, and Officer Derek Hastings was already grinning before he even reached the window. He'd done this 63 times before. Same quiet road, same late hour, same script. Plant it, arrest them, move on. But the exhausted woman slumped behind the wheel of that 10-year-old sedan wasn't just another mark. She was Captain Elena Vance, decorated combat medic, federal asset, and the one person in this godforsaken city who could burn his entire world to ash. He just didn't know it yet. And when he shoved that evidence bag under her seat, confident she'd crumble like all the rest, he missed the small green light blinking silently in the corner of her dash, the camera that was about to end him. If you want to see how one traffic stop dismantled an empire, stick with me until the end. Drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels, and hit that like button if you believe justice isn't just a word. Elena Vance had been awake for 16 hours straight, and the smell of disinfectant was still clinging to her scrubs when she turned onto Ashford Boulevard. Her hands ached. Her back felt like someone had taken a sledgehammer to her spine. 3 overdoses, 1 gunshot wound, and a kid who'd coded twice before she got his heart steady again. She wasn't thinking about anything except the hot shower waiting for her at home and maybe 6 hours of uninterrupted sleep. The lights hit her rearview mirror without warning. She exhaled slowly, pulled over, and waited. Her registration was current. Her inspection sticker wasn't expired. She hadn't been speeding, but she'd lived in Morganfield long enough to know that sometimes none of that mattered. The officer took his time approaching. She could see him in the mirror, adjusting his belt, rolling his shoulders like he was getting ready for something. When he reached her window, he was smiling. "License and registration," he said. She handed them over without a word. He studied them under his flashlight, tilting his head like he was reading a menu. "Elena Vance," he said slowly. "That's a nice name. You coming from work?" "Yes, sir." "Long shift?" 16 hours. "That's rough." He didn't sound sympathetic. He sounded entertained. "You mind stepping out of the vehicle for me?" She hesitated. "Can I ask why?" "Because I'm asking you to." She unbuckled her seatbelt and stepped out. The air was cold, sharper than it had been when she'd left the hospital. Officer Hastings, his name tag was crooked, gestured toward the back of her car. "Pop the trunk." "Officer, I haven't done anything." "Trunk, now." She complied. He didn't even look inside. Instead, he circled back to her open driver's door and crouched down near the seat. His back was to her. His hand moved quickly, and when he stood up, he was holding a small plastic bag filled with white powder. "Well, well," he said, turning to face her. "What do we have here?" Her stomach dropped. "That's not mine." "They all say that." "Because it's not. I've never even seen that before." "Turn around, hands behind your back." "You just planted that. I watched you." His smile widened. "Turn. Around." The cuffs bit into her wrists. He walked her to the cruiser, one hand on her shoulder, the other on his belt. She tried to keep her breathing steady, tried to think through the panic clawing at her chest. She'd seen this before. Different city, different uniform, same pattern, but she'd never been on this side of it. He shoved her into the back seat and slammed the door. As the car pulled away from the curb, Elena's eyes drifted to the small blinking light on her dashboard, the camera she'd installed 3 months ago after her coworker's car had been broken into. The one that recorded everything in a continuous loop and uploaded to cloud storage every 60 seconds. Hastings had no idea. The Morganfield Police Department's holding area smelled like sweat and bleach. Elena sat on a metal bench, still in her scrubs, her wrists raw from the cuffs they'd finally removed. Across from her, a detective named Iris Caldwell was flipping through a file without looking up. "You're a nurse," Caldwell said. "I am." "Mercy General, right?" "Yes." "Long shift tonight?" "I already told Officer Hastings." "I'm asking you." Caldwell finally looked up. Her eyes were flat, uninterested. "You tired?" "Exhausted." "Tired enough to make a mistake?" Elena's jaw tightened. "I didn't make a mistake. I didn't have drugs in my car." "Then how'd they get there?" "Your officer put them there." Caldwell smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "That's a serious accusation." "It's the truth." "You got any proof?" Elena met her gaze and didn't blink. "Yes." That got Caldwell's attention. Her pen stopped moving. What kind of proof? Dash cam. Records everything. Uploads to the cloud in real time. Caldwell's expression didn't change, but something shifted in the air between them. She closed the file. We'll look into it. I want my lawyer. You'll get your phone call. I want my lawyer now. Caldwell stood. Sit tight. She left. Elena sat in the fluorescent silence and counted her breaths. She'd been in worse situations. Fallujah, Kandahar, a field hospital during a mortar attack with no power and 3 soldiers bleeding out on tables made of plywood. She could handle this, but the rage simmering under her ribs was something new. An hour later, a man in a cheap suit walked in. His name was Lawrence Bott, and he looked like he'd been awake even longer than she had. They're saying you had half an ounce of cocaine in your vehicle, he said, sitting down across from her. I didn't. I believe you. But believing you doesn't mean much if we can't prove it. I have proof. Dash cam footage. Bott's eyebrows went up. You're sure it caught the stop? I'm sure. Then we need to get that footage before it disappears. It's already uploaded. Cloud storage. They can't touch it. Bott pulled out his phone. Give me the login. She did. He tapped through the app, his face illuminated by the screen. Then he stopped. His mouth opened slightly, and for a long moment, he didn't say anything. What? Elena asked. He turned the phone toward her. The footage was crystal clear. Hastings approaching the car. Hastings asking her to step out. Hastings crouching by the driver's seat, his hand moving quickly, pulling the bag from his jacket and shoving it under the seat, then standing up and finding it. Jesus, Bott whispered. Can you use it? Can I? Elena, this is a felony. Evidence tampering, false arrest, abuse of power. This guy's career is over. Good. Bott's eyes flicked back to the screen. There's more. What do you mean? He scrolled. Your camera caught the street too. There's another angle, traffic cam on the corner. If we pull that footage, we've got corroboration. Then pull it. I will. But you need to understand something. Bott leaned forward, his voice dropping. If this goes public, they're going to come at you hard. They'll dig into your life, your job, everything. They'll try to discredit you before the footage even sees a courtroom. Elena's smile was cold. Let them try. Check. By morning, the footage was in the hands of Bott's legal team. By noon, it was on the desk of the district attorney. By 2 o'clock, it was leaked. Elena was sitting in a conference room at Bott's office when her phone started blowing up. Texts, calls, notifications. She ignored them until Bott walked in, his face grim. It's out, he said. What's out? The video. Someone leaked it to the press. It's everywhere. Elena's stomach twisted. How bad? Depends on your definition of bad. The footage is going viral. People are furious. But the department's already pushing back. They're claiming the video's been doctored. They're saying you were driving erratically. They're floating rumors about prior drug use. I've never touched drugs in my life. I know, but they don't care about the truth. They care about controlling the narrative. Elena stood. Then we changed the narrative. How? I need to make a statement. Bott shook his head. That's a terrible idea. Anything you say can be twisted. I'm not hiding. If they want to come at me, I'll meet them head on. Elena, set it up. He stared at her for a long moment, then sighed. You're sure about this? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. The press conference was held outside the county courthouse. Bott had tried to limit the media presence, but by the time Elena arrived, there were at least 30 reporters crammed onto the steps, cameras pointed at the podium like weapons. She walked up to the microphone without notes. My name is Elena Vance, she said. Last night, I was pulled over by Officer Derek Hastings of the Morganfield Police Department. He planted drugs in my vehicle, arrested me, and attempted to destroy my life. I have video evidence proving every word I just said. The crowd erupted. Questions came at her like gunfire. Ms. Vance, are you claiming Do you have proof? What about the department's statement? She raised her hand and the noise died down. I'm a nurse. I've spent the last 12 years saving lives. I've worked in combat zones. I've held dying soldiers in my arms and brought them back. I've earned a spotless record, federal clearance, and the respect of every institution I've ever served. Officer Hastings chose the wrong target. Her voice didn't waver. This wasn't a mistake. This was a pattern, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows it. She stepped away from the microphone. The question started again, but she didn't stop. Bhatt was waiting by the car, his face pale. That was reckless, he said. That was necessary. They're going to retaliate. I know. Elena, I can handle it. But even as she said it, her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You just made a very big mistake. She deleted it without responding. The backlash came fast. By that evening, Morganfield PD had released a statement claiming Elena had been uncooperative and combative during the stop. Anonymous sources told local news outlets she'd been flagged for suspicious behavior multiple times. A grainy photo surfaced online, someone who vaguely resembled her outside a nightclub 3 years ago, captioned with baseless insinuations. Bhatt called her at midnight. They're trying to bury you, he said. I noticed. We need to escalate this. Local media isn't enough. We need federal attention. I already made some calls. To who? People I trust. Bhatt paused. Elena, what exactly did you do in the military? Trauma surgeon, field hospitals, high clearance ops. That's it? That's all you need to know. That's not an answer. She hung up. 2 days later, she got a call from a number she recognized. A voice she hadn't heard in 4 years. Captain Vance? Colonel Brennan. I heard you had some trouble. You could say that. You need help? I need someone to pay attention. Consider it done. The line went dead. 72 hours after that, 3 black SUVs rolled into Morganfield. The federal agents didn't announce themselves. They didn't hold a press conference. They just showed up at the police department at 7 in the morning and started seizing files. Elena heard about it from Bhatt, who called her while she was buying groceries. They're tearing the place apart, he said, breathless. FBI, DOJ, they're pulling records, interviewing officers, freezing accounts. Elena, what the hell did you do? I told the truth. This is bigger than one dirty cop. I know. How long have you known? Since the night he arrested me. Pat was silent for a moment. You set this up. I gave them a reason to look. They found the rest on their own. You're terrifying, you know that? She almost smiled. I've been told. By that afternoon, the story had shifted. The Morganfield PD wasn't just defending one officer anymore. They were scrambling to contain a federal investigation that was metastasizing by the hour. And then the second video surfaced. A traffic camera on the corner of Ashford and Grant, angled perfectly to capture Hastings' cruiser. The timestamp matched. The footage showed everything. Hastings pulling the bag from his jacket, Hastings planting it, Hastings smiling. The media exploded. Elena was in Bhatt's office when the news broke. She watched the coverage on the wall-mounted TV, her face expressionless. They're calling you a hero, Bhatt said. I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who refused to be a victim. Same thing, in this case. She didn't respond. On screen, a federal prosecutor was giving a statement. Words like systemic corruption, an ongoing investigation, and multiple victims floated through the air. Then the anchor cut to breaking news. We're now receiving reports that Officer Derek Hastings is not the only officer under investigation. Sources say federal agents have uncovered a network of... Elena's phone buzzed. Another unknown number. Another text. You should have stayed quiet. She stared at it for a long moment, then showed it to Bhatt. That's a threat, he said. I know. We need to report it. I will, but not yet. Why not? Because I want to see how far they're willing to go. Bhatt's face went pale. Elena, if they're threatening you, then they're scared, and scared people make mistakes. This isn't a game. No, she said quietly. It's war. Annette. The mistake came 3 days later. Elena was walking out of the hospital after another shift when she felt it, the prickling awareness that comes from years of training. Someone was watching her. She didn't turn around. She kept walking, her pace steady, her breathing controlled. She reached her car, unlocked it, and slid into the driver's seat. The man stepped out from between 2 parked cars 30 feet away. He was wearing a jacket too heavy for the weather. His right hand was in his pocket. Elena didn't start the engine. She reached into her glove compartment and pulled out her phone, holding it up so he could see it. Then she pressed a button. The man hesitated. Her phone screen showed a live feed. The camera mounted on her dashboard pointed directly at him. Recording. Uploading. He turned and walked away. Elena sat there for a full minute, her heart pounding, before she started the car. Pat called her an hour later. "I just got a very interesting visit from the FBI," he said. "About?" "Someone tried to hire a hitman to take you out." Elena's grip on the steering wheel tightened. "When?" "Last week. The guy they hired turned out to be an undercover agent." "Did they catch who ordered it?" "Not yet, but they're close." Elena exhaled slowly. "Good." "Elena, you need protection." "I'm already protected." "What does that mean?" "It means I'm not alone." She hung up before he could ask more questions. That night, she got another text. But this one was from Colonel Brennan. "Package delivered. Eyes on you 24/7. Don't do anything stupid." She almost laughed. Witten. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A storage unit on the edge of town, rented under a shell company, flagged during a routine financial audit. Federal agents went in with a warrant and found a gold mine. Evidence bags, cash, burner phones, and a meticulously kept ledger documenting every false arrest, every planted piece of evidence, every payoff. 63 names, 63 lives destroyed, and every single transaction tied back to the same network. The press conference was held at the federal building. Elena watched it from Pot's office, her arms crossed, her face unreadable. The U.S. attorney stood at the podium, flanked by FBI agents. "Today we are announcing charges against 17 members of the Morganfield Police Department, including Officer Derek Hastings, Detective Iris Caldwell, and Captain Raymond Oakes. The charges include evidence tampering, civil rights violations, racketeering, and conspiracy to commit fraud." The room erupted. "We are also announcing charges against Victor Lang, a prominent local developer, for his role in orchestrating and funding this criminal enterprise." Elena's eyes narrowed. Victor Lang. She'd heard the name before. Big donations to local campaigns, a new office complex going up downtown, connections that ran deep. "This investigation is ongoing," the U.S. attorney continued. "We believe there are additional victims, and we are urging anyone with information to come forward." Pat muted the TV. "You did it." "We're not done yet." "Elena, they just arrested 17 cops and a millionaire. What more do you want?" "I want Lang in a cell." "He will be. They've got him on conspiracy. That's not enough." Pot stared at her. "What are you planning?" "I'm planning to make sure he can't buy his way out." "How?" She didn't answer. 2 days later, Victor Lang held a press conference of his own. He stood outside his downtown office, flanked by lawyers, his expression calm and controlled. "I have been falsely accused," he said. "I have cooperated fully with federal investigators, and I am confident that the truth will exonerate me." The reporters shouted questions. "Mr. Lang, are you denying? Did you know about the arrests? What about the ledger?" Lang raised his hand. "I have nothing further to say at this time." He turned to leave. That's when Elena stepped out of the crowd. "Mr. Lang," she called. He stopped, turned. His eyes found hers. "Do you remember me?" she asked. The camera swung toward her. "I'm Elena Vance, the nurse you tried to have killed." The crowd went silent. Lang's smile didn't falter, but something cold flickered in his eyes. "I don't know what you're talking about. You hired someone to kill me. He was an undercover agent. The FBI has the recordings." "That's a lie." "Is it?" She took a step closer. "Because I have a message for you. You picked the wrong target, and now everyone's going to know exactly what kind of man you are." Lang's lawyers moved in, pulling him back, but the damage was done. The cameras had caught everything. By that evening, the footage was everywhere. And the next morning, federal agents arrested Victor Lang on charges of conspiracy to commit murder. Elena watched the news from her apartment, a cup of coffee in her hands, and for the first time in weeks, she felt something close to peace. Then her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered, heavy breathing on the other end. Then a voice, low and shaking. "You don't know what you've done." I know exactly what I've done. This isn't over. Yes, Elena said quietly. It is. She hung up. Outside her window, one of Brennan's team sat in an unmarked car, eyes on the street. She wasn't afraid. Not anymore. The unmarked car stayed outside her building for 3 more days, but Elena barely noticed. She was already back at work, pulling double shifts at Mercy General because the hospital was understaffed and people were still bleeding, still coding, still needing someone to fight for them when their bodies gave up. The chaos of the ER was familiar territory, controllable chaos, the kind where she knew exactly what to do and when to do it, not like the legal circus exploding around her. Pat called her during a rare break, his voice crackling through the phone while she sat in the break room with cold coffee and a protein bar she hadn't touched. They're offering a settlement, he said. Elena pressed the phone closer to her ear. Who is? The city. 2.5 million. Full exoneration. Public apology. They want this over. She took a sip of the coffee and regretted it immediately. What's the catch? You sign an NDA. No more press conferences. No more interviews. You take the money and disappear. No. Elena, that's a life-changing amount of... I said no. Pat sighed, the kind of sigh that meant he'd expected this answer but hoped he was wrong. You realize they're going to fight you on everything if you don't take it. Discovery, depositions, years of litigation. They'll drag this out until you're too exhausted to care. Then I'll be exhausted, but I won't be silenced. Why? You've already won. Lang's in custody. Hastings is facing 20 years. The whole department's under federal oversight. What more do you want? Elena stared at the break room wall, at the peeling paint and the outdated health posters, and the corkboard covered in thank you cards from patients who didn't know her name but knew she'd saved their lives. I want every single person who was framed by those bastards to walk free. I want every conviction overturned. I want the system to admit it was broken and fix it. That's what I want. That's not how settlements work. Then we go to trial. Elena, I have to get back to work. She hung up before he could argue further. A code blue alarm was already blaring down the hall. That night, she came home to find an envelope taped to her apartment door. No postage, no return address, just her name written in block letters across the front. She carried it inside, locked the door behind her, and opened it at the kitchen table. Inside was a single photograph. Her, walking out of the hospital, time-stamped from yesterday. On the back, written in the same block letters, still watching. Her hands didn't shake. They should have, but all she felt was a cold, quiet fury that settled in her chest like a stone. She pulled out her phone and texted Brennan. Got another present. Sending you a photo, his reply came 30 seconds later. Uploading now. Stay inside tonight. She didn't respond. She went to the window and looked down at the street. The unmarked car was still there, headlights off, engine idling. Whoever had left the envelope had walked right past them. Either Brennan's people weren't as good as she'd thought, or someone was sending a message. The next morning, Pat called again. We have a problem, he said. Elena was in the middle of restocking a crash cart, her phone wedged between her shoulder and her ear. What kind of problem? 3 witnesses just recanted their statements. People who were ready to testify against Hastings and Caldwell. Now they're saying they were mistaken, that they misremembered, that they don't want to be involved. Elena stopped moving. Someone got to them. That's what I'm thinking, but I can't prove it. And without their testimony, the prosecution's case gets a lot weaker. What about the ledger, the storage unit, the video footage? Still solid. But defense attorneys are good at creating reasonable doubt. If they can show that witnesses are unreliable, they can argue the whole investigation is tainted. Elena closed her eyes. So what do we do? We find new witnesses. People who haven't been intimidated yet. And how do we do that? I don't know. But we'd better figure it out fast because Hastings' arraignment is in 2 days. The arraignment was held in a packed courtroom that smelled like old wood and stale air. Elena sat in the gallery next to Bott, her hands folded in her lap, her face calm. Hastings was led in wearing an orange jumpsuit and wrist chains, his expression blank. He didn't look at her. The judge was a severe woman in her 60s named Carolyn Stroud, and she didn't waste time. Mr. Hastings, you're charged with evidence tampering, civil rights violations, and conspiracy to commit fraud. How do you plead? Hastings' lawyer stood. Not guilty, Your Honor. Bail? We request bail be set at $50,000. Mr. Hastings has deep ties to the community, no prior record, and no flight risk. The prosecutor shot to his feet. Your Honor, the defendant is accused of systematically destroying innocent lives for financial gain. He's a danger to the community and should be held without bail. Judge Stroud looked at Hastings for a long moment. Bail is set at $250,000, cash or bond. Next case. The gavel came down. Elena watched as Hastings was led out. He glanced back once, just once, and their eyes met. He smiled. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Bat tried to shield her, but they pushed in close, microphones and cameras thrust forward like weapons. Ms. Vance, how do you feel about the bail decision? Do you think Hastings will flee? Are you worried about retaliation? She stopped walking. Bat muttered a curse under his breath, but she ignored him. I think the justice system is doing its job, she said evenly, and I trust that Officer Hastings will face the consequences of his actions in a court of law. What about the witnesses who recanted? Her expression didn't change. Fear is a powerful tool, but the truth is stronger. Do you believe you're in danger? I believe that people who profit from corruption will do anything to protect themselves, but I'm not going anywhere. What? She turned and walked away, Bat hurrying to keep up. You shouldn't have said that, he hissed. Why not? Because now they know you're not backing down. Good. I want them to know. That evening, she got a call from a number she didn't recognize. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Ms. Vance? A woman's voice, shaking. Yes. My name is Clara Mendez. I need to talk to you. Elena sat down. About what? About Officer Hastings. He arrested my brother 2 years ago, planted meth in his car. Miguel got 5 years. He's still in prison. Elena's pulse quickened. Are you willing to testify? I don't know. I'm scared. They came to my house last week, told me to keep my mouth shut. Who did? I don't know. 2 men. They didn't say their names, but they knew where I worked, where my kids go to school. Her voice broke. I can't put my family at risk. Elena closed her eyes. I understand. But your brother doesn't deserve to be in prison for something he didn't do. I know, that's why I'm calling, but I need protection. I need to know my family will be safe. I'll make sure of it. Give me your address. Clara hesitated, then rattled off an address in the south part of town. Elena wrote it down. I'll have someone contact you within the hour, Elena said. Federal agents. They'll keep you safe. You promise? I promise. She hung up and immediately called Brennan. I need a favor, she said. Another one? A witness. She's willing to testify, but she's been threatened. I need protection for her and her family. Brennan was silent for a moment. Address? Elena gave it to him. I'll have a team there in 20 minutes, but Elena, you need to be careful. You're making a lot of enemies. I know. I'm serious. Lang has connections. Even from behind bars, he can reach people. I'm not afraid of him. You should be. The line went dead. Within 48 hours, Clara Mendez was in federal protective custody, and her brother's case was being reviewed by the state attorney general's office. The news broke like a wildfire, and suddenly the story wasn't just about one corrupt cop. It was about an entire system built on lies. Elena watched the coverage from her apartment, nursing a glass of wine she wasn't really drinking. Her phone buzzed. Another text from an unknown number. You're signing your own death warrant. She deleted it and poured the wine down the sink. The trial date was set for 6 weeks out, which meant 6 weeks of depositions, strategy sessions, and media circuses. Bott tried to prepare her for the onslaught, but nothing could really prepare anyone for the way the defense attorneys came at her. They dug into everything. Her military service, her medical history, her finances. They found a DUI from when she was 22, a stupid mistake, a night she barely remembered, a charge that had been dismissed after she completed a diversion program. They tried to use it to paint her as reckless, unreliable, a troublemaker with a vendetta. Pat shut it down in the deposition. Ms. Vance made a mistake when she was a college student. he said calmly. She took responsibility, completed the required program, and hasn't had so much as a traffic ticket in 15 years. Meanwhile, your client has systematically destroyed the lives of over 60 people. Let's keep some perspective here. The defense attorney, a wiry man named Garrett Pierce, smiled thinly. We're just establishing a pattern of behavior. The only pattern here is your desperation. Pierce didn't flinch. We'll see what the jury thinks. But the depositions weren't the worst part. The worst part was the parade of people who came forward, not to support her, but to tear her down. Former coworkers who claimed she was difficult to work with. Neighbors who said she kept odd hours and was unfriendly. An ex-boyfriend who called her controlling and paranoid. Pat tried to reassure her. They're grasping at straws, he said. None of this is relevant to the case. Then why does it feel like it's working? Elena asked. Because character assassination always feels personal. But the facts are on our side. The video doesn't lie. The ledger doesn't lie. The storage unit doesn't lie. All of this noise is just distraction. She wanted to believe him, but every new headline felt like a knife. Then 2 weeks before the trial, something shifted. A man named David Ortiz walked into Bott's office unannounced, wearing a rumpled suit and carrying a briefcase that looked like it had survived a war. I need to talk to someone about Derek Hastings, he said. Bott's assistant tried to schedule an appointment, but Ortiz shook his head. No, now. This can't wait. Pat came out of his office, took one look at Ortiz, and ushered him inside. Elena got the call an hour later. You need to get down here, Pat said. Right now. She was there in 15 minutes. Ortiz was sitting at the conference table, his hands wrapped around a cup of coffee he wasn't drinking. He looked up when she walked in, and his eyes were hollow. You're Elena Vance, he said. I am. You're the one who wouldn't let this go. I am. He nodded slowly. Good. Because I can't live with this anymore. Pat gestured for Elena to sit. Mr. Ortiz was a dispatcher for Morganfield PD. He retired 6 months ago. I didn't retire, Ortiz said quietly. I quit because I couldn't keep covering for them. Elena leaned forward. Covering for who? All of them. Hastings, Caldwell, Oakes. I saw the reports. I heard the radio calls. I knew what they were doing, and I kept my mouth shut because I wanted to keep my pension. What did you see? Pat asked. Ortiz pulled a flash drive from his pocket and set it on the table. Radio logs. Dispatch records. Arrest reports that don't match the official paperwork. I copied everything before I left. I've been carrying it around for months, trying to figure out what to do with it. Elena stared at the flash drive. Why now? Because I saw you on the news. I saw what they're doing to you, trying to make you look like the bad guy. And I couldn't take it anymore. You're the only one with the guts to stand up to them. The least I can do is give you the ammunition. Pat picked up the flash drive carefully, like it might explode. This is huge. It's everything, Ortiz said. Dates, times, patterns. You can cross-reference it with the ledger and prove that this wasn't just a few rogue cops. It was policy. Elena looked at him. What made you finally decide to come forward? Ortiz met her eyes. My daughter's a nurse, works night shifts, drives home alone. Every time she leaves the hospital, I think about what could happen to her. And I realized I couldn't live with myself if I let people like Hastings keep doing this. Elena's throat tightened. She reached across the table and shook his hand. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. They're going to come after me too. We'll protect you, Pat said. You'd better. The flash drive was a revelation. Hours of audio, thousands of dispatch logs, patterns so clear that even a first-year law student could have built a case from them. Bott's team worked around the clock, cross-referencing everything with the ledger, the arrest records, the witness statements, and then they found it, a voice recording from 3 years ago. Hastings talking to Caldwell over an unsecured channel. How many did you get this month? Caldwell's voice, casual, almost bored. 7. You? 5. Oakes is beating us both. He got 9. Laughter. Lang's gonna love this. Bonus time. More laughter. Then the line went dead. Bott played the recording for Elena in his office. When it finished, the silence was deafening. That's a confession, Elena said. That's a smoking gun, Pat corrected. This goes to the prosecutor tomorrow. Will it be enough? It's more than enough. This isn't just evidence. This is a conspiracy caught on tape. Elena allowed herself a small smile. Good. But that night, as she was leaving Pat's office, her phone rang. Brennan. We have a problem, he said. Her stomach dropped. What kind? David Ortiz. He's missing. What do you mean missing? I mean, he left his house this morning and never came back. His car's gone. His phone's off. Nobody's seen him. Elena's hand tightened around the phone. Do you think they took him? I think he either ran or someone made sure he couldn't testify. We have to find him. We're trying, but Elena, if they got to him, they might come for you next. Let them try. I'm serious. You need to be somewhere safe. I'm not hiding. You're not listening. She hung up. Ortiz's disappearance made the news by morning. The headline screamed witness tampering, obstruction of justice, conspiracy. The prosecutor held an emergency press conference, promising a full investigation. But Elena knew what it really meant. They were cleaning up loose ends, and she was next on the list. She went to work anyway because sitting at home waiting for something to happen felt like surrender. The hospital was busy, chaotic, the kind of shift where she didn't have time to think about anything except the patient in front of her, until her supervisor pulled her aside. Elena, there are 2 men here asking for you, she said. Elena's pulse spiked. What kind of men? They say they're federal agents. Did they show ID? Yes. It looked legitimate. Elena followed her supervisor to the waiting area. 2 men in dark suits stood near the entrance, badges clipped to their belts. One was tall and broad-shouldered, the other lean and sharp-eyed. The tall one stepped forward. Ms. Vance, I'm Agent Kowalski. This is Agent Rivas. We need to ask you a few questions. About what? David Ortiz. When was the last time you saw him? 2 days ago, at my lawyer's office. Did he say anything about leaving town? No. Did he seem scared? Nervous? He seemed determined. Kowalski exchanged a glance with Rivas. We're going to need you to come with us. Am I under arrest? No, but we need your statement on record. Elena hesitated, then nodded. Let me grab my things. She walked back to the break room, her mind racing. Something felt wrong. Kowalski and Rivas had the right badges, the right credentials, but there was something off about the way they moved, the way they watched her. She pulled out her phone and texted Brennan. 2 agents here, Kowalski and Rivas. Legit? The reply came instantly. No agents by those names in the field office. Get out! Now! Her blood turned to ice. She pocketed her phone and walked to the back exit, forcing herself to stay calm, to not run. Behind her, she heard footsteps. Miss Vance? She pushed through the door and broke into a sprint. The parking lot was a maze of cars and shadows. She could hear them behind her, closing the distance. Her keys were in her hand, her car 20 feet away. She hit the unlock button and dove inside, slamming the door and jamming the key into the ignition. The engine roared to life. One of the men, Kowalski, slammed his hand against her window. Get out of the car! She threw it into reverse and floored it. The man jumped back and she spun the wheel, tires screeching as she tore out of the lot. Her hands were shaking. Her heart was hammering. She dialed Brennan. Where are you? He barked. Leaving the hospital. 2 men tried to grab me. They had fake badges. Jesus. Are you hurt? No, but Brennan, they knew where I was. They knew I'd be there. Someone's leaking information. I'll find out who. But right now, you need to get somewhere safe. Where? I'm sending you an address. Go there and don't talk to anyone. The address led her to a motel on the edge of town, the kind of place where the neon sign flickered and the parking lot was mostly empty. Brennan was waiting outside her room when she arrived. Inside, he said. She followed him in. The room smelled like cigarettes and regret. Brennan locked the door behind them and pulled the curtains. You're sure they were fake? He asked. You told me they were. I know, but I need to hear it from you. Did they do anything that seemed wrong? They didn't ask the right questions. They didn't follow protocol. And they chased me when I ran. Brennan nodded grimly. Then Lang's reach is longer than we thought. What about Ortiz? Still missing, but we found his car, abandoned near the state line. Is he alive? I don't know. Elena sank onto the edge of the bed, exhaustion crashing over her. This isn't going to stop, is it? Not until Lang's people eliminate everyone who can hurt him. We'll stop them. How? Brennan pulled out his phone and showed her a photo. It was grainy, taken from a distance, but she could make out two figures standing near a black SUV. Recognize them? He asked. She squinted. One of the men looked familiar. That's Kowalski, the one who tried to grab me. Right, and the other one is Marcus Hale, former MPD, fired 3 years ago for excessive force. He's been working private security ever since. For who? Guess. Elena's jaw tightened. Lang. Exactly. We have been tracking Hale for the last 72 hours, and tonight he's meeting someone. Who? Brennan's smile was cold. That's what we're going to find out. The warehouse district looked like something out of a crime procedural, crumbling brick, rusted chain link, streetlights that flickered when they worked at all. Brennan parked 3 blocks away and killed the engine. Elena sat in the passenger seat, her hands steady but her pulse hammering in her ears. You should have stayed at the motel, Brennan said. I'm the reason Ortiz came forward. If there's a chance he's here, I'm not sitting this out. If he's here, he's probably already dead. Elena looked at him. Then I need to know. Brennan pulled a vest from the back seat and handed it to her. Put this on, and stay behind me. You're not trained for this. I've been in combat zones. As a medic, not an operator. There's a difference. She strapped on the vest without arguing. Brennan checked his sidearm, racked the slide and holstered it. Then he grabbed a radio and clipped it to his belt. Team 2, you in position, he said into the radio. A crackle of static, then a voice. Affirmative, south entrance secured. Team 3? North side clear, no movement. Brennan glanced at Elena. We go in quiet. If shooting starts, you hit the ground and stay there. Understood? Understood. They moved through the shadows like ghosts. The warehouse loomed ahead, its windows dark, its loading bay door half open. Brennan signaled for Elena to stop, then crept forward, his weapon drawn. She counted her breaths and tried not to think about how exposed they were. Brennan disappeared into the darkness. Seconds stretched into minutes. Then his voice crackled over the radio. We've got activity. 2 vehicles. 4 tangos. Armed. Elena's stomach twisted. Any sign of Ortiz? Brennan didn't answer. She moved closer, staying low, her eyes adjusting to the dim light spilling from the warehouse interior. Through the gap in the loading door, she could see figures moving, shadows against shadows. And then she heard it, a voice, pleading, Please, I didn't tell them anything. A sharp crack, the sound of a fist meeting flesh. Elena's breath caught. Brennan's hand shot up, signaling her to stay back. But she was already moving, her training kicking in before her brain could catch up. She'd heard that kind of fear before. In field hospitals, in triage tents, in the voices of soldiers who knew they were dying. She reached the door just as Brennan grabbed her arm. Don't, he hissed. But she'd already seen inside. Ortiz was tied to a chair in the center of the warehouse, his face a mess of blood and bruises. Marcus Hale stood in front of him, flexing his knuckles. The other men, 3 of them, were spread out, watching the door, watching the shadows, waiting. Brennan pulled her back behind cover. We can't go in hot. There are too many of them. So what do? We wait for backup. He doesn't have time for backup. Brennan's jaw tightened. Elena, I'm not letting him die because I was too scared to act. Before he could stop her, she stepped into the light. The reaction was instant. Hale spun, his hand going to his weapon. The other men followed suit, guns raised. Don't shoot, Elena said, her voice calm, her hands raised. I'm unarmed. Hale's eyes narrowed. Elena Vance, I was hoping you'd show up. Let him go. Why would I do that? Because you don't want this to end with federal agents kicking down every door in this building. Hale smiled. You think you brought backup? You think anyone's coming to save you? I think you're making a mistake. The only mistake here is yours. You should have taken the settlement, should have walked away, but you couldn't leave it alone. Elena took a step forward. You're right, I couldn't. Because people like you don't get to win. Hale raised his weapon, aiming it at her chest. Brave words for someone who's about to die. That's when the lights went out. The warehouse plunged into darkness. Shouts erupted. Gunfire cracked the air, muzzle flashes strobing like lightning. Elena hit the ground, her ears ringing, her heart slamming against her ribs. Brennan's voice cut through the chaos. "Federal agents, drop your weapons!" More gunfire. The sound of boots on concrete. Someone screamed. Elena crawled toward where she'd last seen Ortiz, her hands scraping against grit and debris. She found the chair, overturned now, and fumbled for the ropes binding his wrists. "Ortiz," she whispered, "can you hear me?" A groan. "Vance? I'm getting you out of here." Her fingers worked the knots, slick with blood. The shooting continued somewhere behind her, but she didn't look back. She couldn't. The ropes came loose. Ortiz slumped forward, and she caught him, dragging him toward the nearest wall. "Stay down," she said. "Don't move." Then she heard it. Footsteps. Close. She looked up and saw Hale emerging from the shadows, his weapon trained on her. "You really should have stayed home," he said. Before he could pull the trigger, a gunshot rang out. Hale staggered, his chest blooming red. He dropped to his knees, eyes wide with shock, then collapsed. Brennan stepped out of the darkness, his weapon still raised. "I told you to stay behind me," he said. Elena didn't respond. She was too busy checking Ortiz's pulse, her hands moving on autopilot, weak but steady. He'd live. The rest of Brennan's team swept through the warehouse, zip-tying the surviving men and calling for medical. Within 10 minutes, the place was crawling with agents and paramedics. Elena sat on the edge of an ambulance, her hands shaking now that the adrenaline was wearing off. Brennan handed her a bottle of water. "You okay?" he asked. "I'm fine. That was reckless." "I know." "You could have been killed." "I know." Brennan shook his head. "You're either the bravest person I've ever met or the most stubborn." "Can it be both?" He almost smiled. Ortiz was loaded into an ambulance, conscious but barely. Elena caught his eye as the doors closed, and he gave her a weak nod. She nodded back. Brennan's phone rang. He answered, listened, then hung up. "That was the prosecutor," he said. Hale's phone had text messages, coordinates, instructions, payments, all traceable back to Lang. Elena looked at him. "Is it enough?" "It's enough to add conspiracy to commit murder to his charges. He's not getting out. Ever." She closed her eyes and let herself feel the weight of it. They'd won. Not completely, not yet, but enough. Enough to matter. But the relief lasted all of 30 seconds, because Brennan's phone rang again. And this time, when he answered, his face went pale. "When?" he said. "How many?" Elena stood. "What is it?" Brennan lowered the phone. "There's been an attack. Federal courthouse. Someone tried to blow up the evidence room." Her stomach dropped. "Did they succeed?" "No, but 2 agents are dead." The courthouse was a war zone. Police tape cordoned off the entire block. Fire trucks and ambulances lined the street. Elena and Brennan arrived to find smoke still curling from a shattered window on the 3rd floor. The lead investigator was a grim-faced woman named Agent Delacroix. She met them at the perimeter. "Bomber used a shaped charge," she said. "Professional job. Targeted the evidence room where we were storing materials from the Lang investigation." "Was anything destroyed?" Brennan asked. "Most of it survived. Fireproof safes did their job. But the intent was clear. Wipe out the case before it goes to trial." Elena felt ice spreading through her veins. "Who did it?" "We don't know yet. Bomber's dead. Detonated early, took himself out along with 2 of our people." "Suicide attack? Or incompetence? Either way, we're treating this as domestic terrorism." Brennan pulled Delacroix aside, their voices low. Elena stood in the cold, staring at the courthouse, at the broken windows and the smoke and the body bags being carried out. This wasn't over. It was escalating. By the time they left the courthouse, the sun was rising, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Elena hadn't slept in over 24 hours, but sleep felt impossible. Her mind was racing, connecting dots, seeing patterns. Lang was in federal custody. His assets were frozen. His network was crumbling. But someone was still fighting for him, still willing to kill to protect whatever remained. Brennan drove her back to the motel in silence. When he pulled into the parking lot, he turned to her. "You need to leave town," he said. No. Elena, this isn't a request. You're a target. The closer we get to trial, the more desperate they're going to get. I'm not running. You're not listening. I don't care. Her voice was sharp, cutting. I didn't start this fight, but I'm damn sure going to finish it. If they want me, they can come for me. But I'm not hiding. Brennan stared at her for a long moment. Then he sighed. You're going to get yourself killed. Maybe, but at least I'll die standing up. She got out of the car and walked to her room. Behind her, she heard Brennan's engine idle for a moment before he drove away. Inside, she locked the door, pulled the curtains, and sat on the bed with her phone. She scrolled through the news, headlines screaming about the courthouse attack, about the ongoing investigation, about the trial that was supposed to start in less than 2 weeks. Her phone buzzed, a text from Bot. We need to talk. My office. Tomorrow morning. She didn't respond. She was too tired to think, too wired to sleep. She lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling, counting the cracks in the plaster. Somewhere in the city, people were planning her death, and she was done waiting for them to make the next move. The next morning, Bahat's office felt like a bunker. The blinds were drawn, the door was locked. He had a pot of coffee brewing and a stack of files on his desk that looked like it could collapse under its own weight. Sit, he said. Elena sat. Pat poured 2 cups of coffee and slid one across the desk. The prosecutor called me this morning. They want to move the trial up. How soon? 5 days. Elena blinked. That's not enough time to... I know, but after the courthouse attack, they're worried about losing evidence, or losing witnesses, or losing you. I'm not going anywhere. That's what I told them. But Elena, this is happening fast, faster than anyone planned. And if we're not ready, we'll be ready. Bot rubbed his eyes. I wish I had your confidence. What about the defense? Are they ready? They're scrambling. Pierce filed a motion to delay, but the judge denied it. They're stuck. Elena allowed herself a small, cold smile. Good. Pot leaned back in his chair. There's something else. The prosecutor wants you to testify. Of course I'm testifying. No, I mean on opening day. First witness. They want to put you on the stand and let you tell your story before the defense has a chance to muddy the waters. Elena's stomach tightened. That's risky. It is. But it's also powerful. You're credible. You're sympathetic. And your testimony sets the tone for everything that follows. What if I screw it up? You won't. You don't know that. Pat met her eyes. I do. Because you've been fighting for this since the moment Hastings pulled you over. You're not going to falter now. She wanted to believe him, but the weight of it, the stakes, the scrutiny, the knowledge that one wrong word could unravel everything, pressed down on her like a physical force. When do I prep? She asked. Tomorrow, all day. The prosecutor's going to grill you harder than the defense ever could. If you can survive that, you can survive anything. Elena nodded. Okay. Okay. She stood to leave, but Pot stopped her. Elena, I need you to promise me something. What? If this gets too dangerous, if they come for you again, promise me you'll let Brennan protect you. No more heroics, no more charging into warehouses. She didn't answer. Elena, I'll do what I have to do. That's not a promise. It's the best you're going to get. She left before he could argue. The prep session with the prosecutor was brutal. Assistant U.S. Attorney Monica Reyes was a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and sharper questions. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. Walk me through the night you were arrested, she said. Elena did, step by step, detail by detail. Reyes interrupted constantly, poking holes, challenging timelines, demanding clarification. Why didn't you call your lawyer immediately? I didn't have my phone. Hastings confiscated it. Why didn't you demand one? I did. They told me to sit tight. How long did you wait? An hour? Maybe more? Did you try to leave? I was in a locked room. Did you ask to leave? Yes. And? They ignored me. Reyes made a note. The defense is going to say you were uncooperative, that you escalated the situation. How? By existing. By refusing to comply. I complied with every lawful order. Hastings is the one who broke the law. Reyes studied her. You're angry. Of course I'm angry. Don't be. Not on the stand. Anger makes you look vindictive. Stick to the facts. Stay calm. Let the evidence speak for itself. Elena clenched her jaw. I'll do my best. Your best isn't good enough. You need to be perfect. The session went on for hours. By the time it ended, Elena's head was pounding and her throat was raw. But she felt sharper, focused, ready. Reyes walked her to the door. You're going to do fine, she said. Just remember, this isn't about revenge. It's about justice. What's the difference? Revenge is personal. Justice is for everyone. Elena thought about that on the drive back to the motel. About the 63 people whose lives had been destroyed. About Clara Mendez and her brother. About Ortiz still recovering in the hospital. This wasn't just about her. It never had been. The night before the trial, Elena couldn't sleep. She lay in the motel bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind replaying every moment from the past weeks. The stop, the arrest, the footage, the fight. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Last chance. Drop the case or face the consequences. She stared at it for a long moment. Then she typed a reply. Come and get me. She hit send and turned off her phone. Sleep came eventually, restless and thin. The courtroom was packed. Elena sat in the witness waiting room with Pat, her hands folded in her lap, her face calm. She could hear the murmur of voices through the door, reporters, spectators, family members of the accused. Pat checked his watch. They'll call you soon. I'm ready. Remember what Reyes said. Stick to the facts. Stay calm. I know. The bailiff opened the door. Ms. Vance, you're up. Elena stood. Pat squeezed her shoulder once, briefly, then let go. She walked into the courtroom and the noise died. Every eye turned to her. She kept her gaze forward, her steps measured, her breathing steady. The witness stand felt smaller than she'd expected. She sat down, raised her right hand, and swore to tell the truth. Reyes approached, her expression neutral. Please state your name for the record. Elena Marie Vance. Ms. Vance, can you tell the court what happened on the night of September 14th? Elena took a breath, and then she told them everything. The stop, the planted evidence, the arrest, the footage, the fight. She spoke clearly, calmly, her voice never wavering. She met the eyes of the jurors, saw them leaning forward, listening. Reyes guided her through the timeline, step by step, laying out the case like a puzzle falling into place. And then it was the defense's turn. Garrett Pierce stood, buttoning his jacket, his smile thin. Ms. Vance, you've painted quite a picture here, but let's talk about what you left out. Elena met his gaze. I didn't leave anything out. Didn't you? You mentioned your military service, but you didn't mention the reprimand you received in 2019 for insubordination. Bat was on his feet. Objection! Relevance! The judge looked at Pierce. Sustained. Move on, counselor. Pierce didn't miss a beat. You've claimed Officer Hastings planted evidence, but isn't it possible you simply didn't notice the bag in your car before he found it? No. How can you be sure? Because I clean my car every week. There was nothing under that seat. But you were exhausted, weren't you? 16-hour shift, you said. Isn't it possible you missed it? No. Pierce's smile widened. You seem very certain for someone who was too tired to drive safely. I was tired. I wasn't impaired. And yet you were pulled over. For no reason. Officer Hastings had a reason. You were swerving. I wasn't. That's your word against his. Elena's jaw tightened. No, it's the dashcam footage against his lies. Pierce's expression flickered, just for a second, but she saw it. No further questions, he said. Elena stepped down. Her legs felt like water, but she kept her head high. She walked past the defense table, past Hastings, who wouldn't look at her, and back to the gallery. Pat was waiting. You did great, he whispered. She didn't feel great. She felt like she'd been stripped bare in front of a room full of strangers. But it wasn't over yet. The trial lasted 4 days. Witness after witness took the stand. Clara Mendez, shaking but resolute. Ortiz, still bruised but alive. Federal agents with boxes of evidence. Audio recordings, video footage. The ledger. The defense tried to fight back, but every argument crumbled under the weight of the evidence. Pierce grew more desperate, more erratic. Objections were overruled, motions denied. On the fourth day, the jury deliberated for 3 hours. When they came back, Elena was sitting in the gallery, her hands gripping the bench in front of her. The foreman stood. "We find the defendant, Derek Hastings, guilty on all counts." The courtroom erupted. Elena closed her eyes and let the noise wash over her. Guilty. Caldwell's trial followed a week later. Same result. Oakes, 2 weeks after that. Same result. And then it was Lang's turn. The trial was bigger, louder, more brutal. Lang's defense team threw everything at the wall: character witnesses, expert testimony, procedural challenges. But the evidence was ironclad. The recordings, the ledger, the testimony. The jury took 5 hours. Guilty on all counts. Elena watched as Lang was led out of the courtroom in chains, his face blank. He didn't look at her, but she looked at him, and she smiled. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Elena stood at the top of the steps, Pat beside her, and faced the cameras. "Justice," she said, "is not just a word. It's a promise." And today, that promise was kept. The questions came fast, but she didn't answer them. She turned and walked away, Brennan falling into step beside her. "It's over," he said. "Not yet." "What do you mean?" She pulled out her phone and showed him a text. It had come in during the verdict. "You think you've won, but this is just the beginning." Brennan's face darkened. "When did you get this?" 10 minutes ago." "From who?" "I don't know, but someone's still out there." Brennan grabbed her arm. "Elena, we need to get you somewhere safe." The gunshot cracked the air like thunder. The bullet hit the stone column 6 inches from Elena's head, spraying chips of granite across her face. Brennan tackled her to the ground before the second shot rang out, his body covering hers as chaos erupted on the courthouse steps. People screamed and scattered. More gunfire cracked the air, return fire from Brennan's team, positioned in vehicles around the perimeter. Elena's ears were ringing. Her cheek was pressed against cold concrete. She could taste blood where she'd bitten her tongue. "Stay down!" Brennan shouted. She stayed down. The shooting stopped as abruptly as it started. Brennan hauled her to his feet and dragged her toward an armored SUV that had screeched to a stop at the curb. Agents formed a human wall around them, weapons drawn, scanning rooftops and windows. They shoved her into the back seat. Brennan climbed in after her, slamming the door. The driver floored it before Brennan even had his seatbelt on. Elena's hands were shaking. She pressed them against her thighs to make them stop. "Did you get him?" she asked. Brennan was on his radio, barking orders. He held up a finger. "Wait." A voice crackled through. "Shoot her down, rooftop across the street. 1 male, deceased." Brennan exhaled. "ID?" "Working on it." He turned to Elena. "You hit?" "No." "You're bleeding." She touched her face and her fingers came away red. "It's nothing, just scratches." Brennan pulled a first aid kit from under the seat and handed her gauze. She pressed it to her cheek, wincing. "This has to stop," she said quietly. "It will. Once we figure out who's still pulling strings. Lang's in prison. Hastings, Caldwell, Oakes, they're all locked up. Who's left?" Brennan didn't answer. He was staring out the window, his jaw tight. The SUV took them to a federal safe house on the outskirts of town, a nondescript ranch home with reinforced windows and enough surveillance equipment to launch a satellite. Elena was escorted inside by 2 agents who looked like they could bench press a truck. Pat was already there, pacing in the living room, his tie loose and his face pale. "Are you okay?" he asked when he saw her. "I'm fine." "You were almost killed, but I wasn't." Pat ran a hand through his hair. "This is insane. They just convicted Lang. The network's dismantled. Who the hell is still trying to kill you?" "That's what we're going to find out," Brennan said, walking in behind her. He dropped a file on the coffee table. "Shooter's been ID'd. His name was Ryan Nestor. Former military, dishonorable discharge, history of contract work in conflict zones." Elena sat down. "Mercenary." "Exactly, which means someone hired him." "Can you trace the payment?" "We're trying, but these guys are good at covering their tracks." Brennan pulled up a photo on his phone and showed it to her. "Recognize him?" The man in the photo was in his 40s, hard-faced, with a scar running through his left eyebrow. Elena shook her head. Never seen him before. He's been in Morganfield for 3 weeks, stayed at a motel under a fake name, paid cash. No credit cards, no paper trail. Then how did you find him? Surveillance footage from a gas station 2 blocks from the courthouse. He bought cigarettes this morning. We ran facial recognition and got a hit. Elena leaned back against the couch. So someone knew the verdict was coming down today. They knew I'd be at the courthouse, and they hired a professional to take me out. That's the theory. Who has that kind of reach? Lang's assets are frozen. His people are either in custody or flipped. Brennan sat down across from her. Not all of them. He pulled another file from his bag and opened it. Inside were surveillance photos, grainy but clear enough. A woman in her 50s, impeccably dressed, stepping out of a black sedan. Who is she? Elena asked. Vanessa Lang, Victor's wife. Elena's stomach dropped. I thought she was cooperating with the investigation. She was, or at least she pretended to be, gave us access to financial records, testified about her husband's business dealings, but it was all surface-level stuff. Nothing that really hurt him. You think she's been running things from the outside? I think she's been protecting her interests. Lang built an empire, but Vanessa's the one who kept it running. She's smart, connected, and she's got money stashed in places we haven't found yet. Pat sat down heavily. If she's behind this, why go after Elena? The case is over. Lang's convicted. What does she gain? Revenge, Elena said quietly. I'm the reason her husband's in prison. I'm the one who wouldn't let it go. Brennan nodded. And if you're dead, you can't testify in any of the civil suits that are coming. You can't keep pushing for reforms. You can't be a symbol. Elena looked at the photo of Vanessa Lang, poised, elegant, untouchable. So what do? We prove it, and we bring her down. The investigation into Vanessa Lang moved fast. Brennan's team pulled phone records, financial transactions, travel logs. They interviewed associates, business partners, household staff. And slowly, piece by piece, the picture came together. Vanessa had been careful. She used shell companies, offshore accounts, encrypted communications. But she wasn't perfect. And when the FBI started digging, they found cracks. A payment to a security consulting firm that didn't exist. A wire transfer to a numbered account in the Cayman Islands. A burner phone registered to a fake name but used exclusively to contact known criminals. Within 72 hours, they had enough to bring her in for questioning. Elena watched the interrogation from an observation room, her arms crossed, her face unreadable. Vanessa sat across from 2 FBI agents, her lawyer beside her, looking calm and composed. Mrs. Lang, can you explain this payment? Agent Delacroix slid a document across the table. Vanessa barely glanced at it. That's a consulting fee. Perfectly legal. For a company that doesn't exist? I'm not responsible for vetting every vendor my accountant hires. What about this wire transfer? $25,000 to an account in the Caymans. Investment diversification. And this burner phone? Vanessa's lawyer leaned forward. My client has answered your questions. Unless you have evidence of a crime, we're done here. Delacroix smiled. We have plenty of evidence. Text messages from that burner phone to Ryan Nestor, the man who tried to kill Elena Vance yesterday. Vanessa's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes, just for a second. I don't know anyone by that name, she said. Then how do you explain the messages? I don't, because they don't exist. Delacroix pulled out her phone and read aloud. Quote, target confirmed, courthouse steps, make it clean. Sent from your number to Nestor's phone 6 hours before the shooting. Vanessa's lawyer stood. This interview is over. Sit down, Delacroix said. We're not finished. You're fishing, you have circumstantial evidence at best. We have a dead assassin with your number in his phone. We have financial records showing you paid him. And we have a dozen witnesses who can place you in contact with known criminals. That's not circumstantial. That's conspiracy to commit murder. Vanessa finally looked rattled, just a little. I want to speak to my lawyer. Alone. Delacroix stood. You've got 5 minutes. She left the room. In the observation room, Brennan turned to Elena. She's going to lawyer up in Stonewall, he said. Can you hold her? For now, but unless we find something concrete, she'll walk. Elena stared through the glass at Vanessa, who was whispering furiously with her attorney. Then we find something concrete. The break came from an unexpected source. A forensic accountant named Peter Lim, buried in spreadsheets for 3 days straight, found a discrepancy in Vanessa's real estate holdings. A property in her name, a storage facility on the east side of town. That wasn't listed on any of the financial disclosures she'd provided to the FBI. Brennan got a warrant within the hour. The storage facility was a sprawling complex of corrugated metal units, most of them locked and abandoned. Vanessa's unit was in the back corner, Unit 47, secured with a heavy-duty padlock and a security camera pointed directly at the door. The FBI's tactical team cut the lock and pulled the door open. Inside, they found filing cabinets, banker's boxes, and a safe bolted to the floor. The files contained records dating back 15 years, payoffs, bribes, falsified documents. The safe held cash, passports under fake names, and a ledger that made Lang's operation look like amateur hour. Elena arrived an hour later with Brennan. The scene was controlled chaos. Agents photographing evidence, cataloging documents, hauling boxes into vans. "This is everything," Brennan said, handing her a file. Proof that Vanessa wasn't just complicit. She was running the whole operation. Elena flipped through the pages. Contracts, wire transfers, correspondence with officials, lawyers, cops. Vanessa's signature on every page. "How did we miss this?" she asked. "Because she's good. And because everyone underestimated her." Elena's jaw tightened. Not anymore. But as they continued sorting through the evidence, something else emerged. A second ledger, hidden in a false bottom of one of the file cabinets. This one wasn't about cops or local officials. It detailed payments to state legislators, judges, federal appointees. The corruption ran deeper than anyone had imagined. Brennan flipped through the pages, his face darkening with each entry. This isn't just Morganfield. This goes all the way to the state capitol, maybe beyond. Elena felt her pulse quicken. How many people are we talking about? At least 24 names here. Senators, a deputy attorney general, 3 judges. Are any of them still active? Brennan checked his phone, cross-referencing names. His expression went grim. Most of them. And one of the judges presided over half the cases in Lang's network. Elena's hands clenched into fists. So every ruling, every sentencing, bought and paid for. Yeah. The revelation hit the news within hours. Not because the FBI leaked it, they tried to keep it contained, but because someone inside the investigation talked. By evening, every major outlet was running headlines about judicial corruption, about a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of state government. The governor called an emergency press conference. The state attorney general announced a special task force. 3 judges resigned before dawn. Elena watched it all unfold from the safe house, feeling like she was standing at the edge of a chasm that kept getting wider. Every rock they overturned revealed something worse underneath. Pot called her past midnight. "This is bigger than we thought," he said, his voice strained. "I know. The civil suits alone could take years. Decades, maybe. We're talking about overturning hundreds of convictions, compensating victims, reforming entire institutions." "Good." Pat was quiet for a moment. "You understand what this means, right? You're going to be the face of this for a long time, testifying in case after case, reliving everything over and over." "I know. Well, are you ready for that?" Elena looked at her reflection in the dark window. She looked tired, older than her years, but underneath the exhaustion, there was something else, something that hadn't been there before. Resolve. "I don't have a choice," she said. "These people deserve justice, and I'm the only one who can give it to them." "You're not alone in this." "I know, but I'm the one who has to see it through." Pat sighed. "Then I'll be with you every step of the way." Vanessa Lang was arrested that evening. The news broke like a tidal wave, headlines screaming about the wife who'd orchestrated an empire of corruption while playing the role of dutiful spouse. The media ate it up. But Vanessa didn't go quietly. Even in handcuffs, even being led into a federal building surrounded by agents, she managed to project an air of superiority. Like this was all beneath her, like she'd walk out in a week and resume her life. Elena watched the footage and felt a cold satisfaction settle in her chest. Vanessa had no idea what was coming. The preliminary hearing for Vanessa Lang was held 2 weeks later. The courtroom was packed again. Reporters, spectators, victims of the network finally seeing the architect of their suffering in handcuffs. Elena sat in the front row. Vanessa was let in, her composure cracked now, her eyes darting around the room. When her gaze landed on Elena, she held it for a long moment. Elena didn't look away. The evidence was laid out methodically. The storage unit, the ledgers, both of them. The phone records, the payments to Nestor, the web of corruption that Vanessa had spun over 15 years. Vanessa's lawyer tried to argue that the evidence was circumstantial, that his client was being scapegoated, but the judge wasn't buying it. Mrs. Lang, you're charged with conspiracy to commit murder, racketeering, obstruction of justice, bribery of public officials, and 37 counts of fraud. Bail is denied. You will be held pending trial. The gavel came down. Vanessa's face went white. She turned to her lawyer, hissing something Elena couldn't hear. But it didn't matter. She was done. Outside the courthouse, Elena stood on the steps where she'd nearly been killed. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. Pat stood beside her, hands in his pockets. "It's really over," he said. "Not yet. She still has to be convicted." "She will be. The evidence is overwhelming." Elena nodded. "What happens to all the people who were framed? The ones still in prison?" The state attorney general's office is reviewing every case connected to Hastings, Caldwell, Oaks, and now the judges on Vanessa's payroll. They're fast-tracking exonerations. It'll take time, but they'll get out. And the city? The department? Federal oversight for the next 5 years. New leadership, new policies, complete restructuring from the top down. It's not perfect, but it's a start. Elena looked out at the street, at the people walking by, at the city that had almost destroyed her. "I want to do more." "Like what?" "Start a foundation. Help people who've been wrongfully convicted. Fund legal aid. Push for reform at every level." Pat smiled. "That sounds like you. Will you help?" "Of course." She turned to face him. "Thank you. For everything." "You did the hard part. I just filed the paperwork." She almost laughed. That night, she returned to her apartment for the first time in weeks. It felt strange, unfamiliar, like a place she'd lived in a different lifetime. She walked through the rooms, touching furniture, opening cabinets, reacquainting herself with the space. Her phone rang. Brennan. "How are you holding up?" he asked. "I'm okay. Just trying to figure out what normal looks like again." "It'll take time." "I know. Listen, there's something you should know. We traced the text you got after the verdict. The one that said, 'This is just the beginning.'" Elena's stomach tightened. "And?" "It came from a phone registered to Vanessa. She sent it right before the shooting. Probably figured she'd be untouchable no matter what happened." "So it's over." Brennan hesitated. "Mostly." "What does that mean?" "We're still tracking down some of her associates, people who were on the periphery of the network. Most of them are running scared, but a few might try something stupid." "You think I'm still in danger?" "I think you should stay cautious, but the worst is behind you." Elena closed her eyes. "Good. Get some rest. You've earned it." She hung up and sat down on the couch. For the first time in months, she felt the weight lifting. Not completely, there would always be scars, always be nights when she woke up hearing gunshots or seeing Hastings smile. But it was manageable now, survivable. She pulled out her laptop and started drafting a proposal for the foundation. Mission statement, goals, funding strategies. She worked late into the night, the words flowing faster than she could type. By the time she finally stopped, the sun was rising. And for the first time in a long time, she felt something close to hope. The next morning, she went back to work at Mercy General. Her colleagues greeted her with hugs and handshakes, with questions about the trial and congratulations on the verdicts. She smiled and deflected and got back to what she did best: saving lives. But halfway through her shift, her supervisor pulled her aside. "Elena, there's someone here to see you." "Who?" "She didn't say, just asked for you by name." Elena's pulse quickened. She followed her supervisor to the waiting room and found a woman in her 30s, thin and nervous, clutching a purse like a lifeline. "Ms. Vance?" the woman asked. "Yes?" "My name is Angela Rourke. My husband was arrested by Officer Hastings 3 years ago. He's been in prison ever since. Elena's chest tightened. I'm so sorry. I saw you on the news. I saw what you did. And I needed to thank you. Because of you, they're reviewing his case. They're going to let him out. Elena didn't know what to say. She reached out and took Angela's hand. He didn't deserve what happened to him, Angela continued, her voice breaking. None of us did. But you fought for us, even when no one else would. I'm just glad I could help. Angela wiped her eyes. You did more than help. You gave us our lives back. After Angela left, Elena stood in the hallway for a long time, trying to compose herself. A nurse walked by and squeezed her shoulder without saying anything. The gesture was enough. She went back to work, but throughout the day more people came. Families of the wrongfully convicted. People who'd been harassed by corrupt cops. A man whose brother had died in prison for a crime he didn't commit. Who just wanted to shake her hand and say thank you. By the end of her shift, Elena was emotionally drained but strangely buoyed. This was why she'd fought. Not for headlines or recognition. For these people. For the lives she could help restore. The weeks that followed were a blur. Vanessa's trial was set. The foundation paperwork was filed. Exonerations began rolling in. 1, then 5, then 20, then 50. Each one was a small victory, a life reclaimed. Elena threw herself into the work. She met with families, connected them with lawyers, helped them navigate the labyrinth of the legal system. She gave interviews, spoke at conferences, became a voice for people who'd been silenced. And slowly, the city began to change. New police leadership was installed. The entire command structure was gutted and rebuilt. Federal monitors embedded in every precinct. Civilian oversight boards with real power. Body cameras became mandatory. Use of force policies were rewritten from scratch. It wasn't perfect. There were still problems, still bad actors slipping through the cracks. But it was better. Measurably, demonstrably better. One evening, 3 months after Vanessa's arrest, Pat called her. Turn on the news, he said. She did. The anchor was standing outside the state capitol, microphone in hand. In a landmark decision, Governor Patricia Harlow has signed into law the Accountability and Reform Act, a sweeping piece of legislation aimed at preventing the kind of corruption that plagued Morganfield and exposed a statewide network of judicial misconduct. The law establishes independent oversight of law enforcement, mandatory transparency and conviction reviews, and protections for whistleblowers. It was inspired by the case of Elena Vance, the nurse whose fight for justice sparked the largest corruption investigation in state history. Elena turned off the TV. Pat was still on the phone. You did it, he said. We did it. No, this was you. You're the one who wouldn't quit. She didn't respond. Elena, you should be proud. I am, but I'm also exhausted. Pat laughed softly. Then rest. You've earned it. She hung up and sat in the quiet of her apartment. Outside, the city hummed with life, cars, voices, the distant wail of a siren. It was the same city that had tried to destroy her, but it was also the city she'd saved. Her phone buzzed, a text from Brennan. Vanessa's lawyer just reached out. She wants to make a deal. Elena stared at the message, then she typed a reply. No deals, she goes to trial. Brennan's response came immediately. Agreed. Trial starts in 4 weeks. She set the phone down and looked out the window. Somewhere in the city, people were sleeping safely because of what she'd done. Somewhere, families were being reunited. Somewhere, justice was being served. And in a federal holding cell, Vanessa Lang sat alone, her empire reduced to ashes, realizing that for the first time in her life, money and connections couldn't save her. Elena smiled. Then she went to bed. For the first time in months, she slept through the night without waking. But 3 days before Vanessa's trial was set to begin, Elena received a package at the Foundation's office. No return address. Just her name on the label. Inside was a single photograph. Her, leaving the hospital, timestamp from yesterday. And on the back, written in block letters. She's not the only one left. Beneath it, a name she didn't recognize, Marcus Trent. Elena's hands went cold. She pulled out her phone and called Brennan. Who is Marcus Trent? She asked the moment he picked up. Silence on the other end. Then, where did you hear that name? Someone just sent me a photo. His name was on the back. What kind of photo? Me. Leaving work. Recent. Brennan cursed. Don't move. I'm sending a team to you right now. Who is he, Brennan? Vanessa's brother. We've been looking for him since her arrest. He went off the grid 2 months ago. Elena, if he's surfacing now, he's coming for me. We don't know that for sure. Yes, we do. The line went quiet. Stay where you are, Brennan finally said. Don't go anywhere alone. Don't. Elena hung up. She looked at the photo again, at her own image, captured without her knowledge, at the name written on the back, and she realized something. This wouldn't end with Vanessa's conviction. It wouldn't end with reforms or laws or justice served in a courtroom. It would only end when every last person who'd profited from that network was brought down. And if Marcus Trent wanted to come for her, she'd be ready. She pulled out her laptop and started researching. Within an hour, she had his photograph, his known associates, his last confirmed location. She sent everything to Brennan. Then she went home, locked her door, and waited. Because the war wasn't over. It was just entering its final phase. Elena didn't sleep that night. She sat at her kitchen table with her laptop, her phone, and a pistol Brennan had given her months ago that she'd never thought she'd actually need. The gun felt heavy and foreign in her hand, but she kept it within reach anyway. By 3 a.m, she'd compiled everything she could find on Marcus Trent. 52 years old. Former corporate attorney. Vanessa's older brother, and the one who taught her how to navigate financial loopholes and shell corporations. He'd been smart enough to keep his name off most documents, but not smart enough to disappear completely. His last known address was in coastal Maine. His phone had been turned off for 8 weeks. His bank accounts hadn't been touched in 2 months. Either he was dead, or he'd gone underground with a new identity and enough cash to stay hidden for years. Elena was betting on the latter. Her phone buzzed. Brennan. I've got eyes on your building, he said without preamble. 2 teams. Nobody gets in or out without us knowing. He's not coming here. You don't know that. Yes, I do. He's too smart for a frontal assault. He'll wait. Watch. Look for an opening. Then we don't give him one. Elena rubbed her eyes. How long can you keep teams on me? A week? A month? He can wait longer than that. Brennan was quiet. So what do you want to do? I want to draw him out. Absolutely not. It's the only way to end this. Elena, he's a professional. He's had months to plan. And I'm the target he wants. If I make myself visible, he'll come for me. And when he does, you'll be ready. This is insane. This is necessary. Her voice was hard. I'm not spending the rest of my life looking over my shoulder, waiting for him to pick his moment. I want this finished. Brennan exhaled slowly. What did you have in mind? Vanessa's trial starts in 3 days. I'll be there. Front row. Highly visible. He won't be able to resist. You're using yourself as bait. I'm using myself as the end of this. There's a difference. Brennan didn't respond for a long moment. Then, you're sure about this? I've never been more sure of anything. All right, but we do this my way. Full tactical support. Snipers on every rooftop, undercover agents in the crowd, body armor under your clothes. And if I say abort, we abort. No arguments. Deal. She hung up and stared at the photo again. Marcus Trent's name stared back at her from the white paper. 3 days. She could survive 3 more days. The morning of Vanessa's trial, Elena dressed carefully. A dark blazer that concealed the Kevlar vest underneath, hair pulled back, minimal jewelry. She looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. 6 months ago, she'd been a nurse who just wanted to go home after a long shift. Now she was someone else entirely. Brennan picked her up at 7. The drive to the courthouse was tense and silent. 4 escort vehicles surrounded them, 2 ahead, 2 behind. Snipers were already in position on the surrounding buildings. Undercover agents mingled with the crowd of reporters and spectators gathering outside. Last chance to back out, Brennan said as they approached. I'm not backing out. He could be anywhere. In the crowd, in a building, on a rooftop we missed. Then your people better be good at their jobs. Brennan's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. The courthouse steps were packed. Cameras, microphones, protesters holding signs demanding justice. Elena stepped out of the SUV, and the crowd surged forward. Brennan's team formed a wall around her, moving her through the chaos. Questions came from every direction. Ms. Vance, how do you feel about today's trial? Do you think Vanessa Lang will be convicted? Are you afraid of retaliation? Elena kept her head up, her expression calm. She didn't answer, just kept moving. They were 10 feet from the entrance when she saw him. A man in a gray jacket standing at the edge of the crowd. Older. Watching her with an intensity that made her skin crawl. Their eyes met for half a second, and then he turned and disappeared into the throng. Brennan, she said quietly. Gray jacket, 3 o'clock, moving east. Brennan spoke into his radio. Possible target, gray jacket, heading east on foot. All units converge. Agents peeled off from the crowd, moving fast but not running. Elena kept walking toward the courthouse entrance, forcing herself not to look back. They reached the doors, went through security, climbed the stairs to the courtroom. Brennan's radio crackled. Target lost, repeat, target lost. Elena's stomach twisted. Inside the courtroom, she took her seat in the front row. Pat was already there, reviewing notes. He looked up when she sat down. You okay? He asked. Fine. You look tense. It's been a long week. The courtroom filled quickly. Reporters, victims, families of the wrongfully convicted. And then Vanessa was brought in, flanked by federal marshals, her wrists cuffed in front of her. She looked diminished somehow, smaller. Her expensive suit couldn't hide the shadows under her eyes, or the way her hands shook slightly as she sat down. Her gaze swept the room and landed on Elena. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Vanessa smiled, cold and humorless. Elena didn't smile back. The judge entered. Everyone stood. The trial began. The prosecution's opening statement was brutal and methodical. Assistant U.S. Attorney Reyes laid out the case piece by piece, the storage unit, the ledgers, the payments to Nestor, the conspiracy that had reached into every level of state government. Vanessa Lang didn't just enable corruption, Reyes said, her voice cutting through the courtroom. She architected it. She profited from it. And when her empire began to crumble, she tried to kill the one person brave enough to expose it. She gestured toward Elena. Elena Vance is alive today by sheer luck because the shooter hired to kill her made a mistake. But make no mistake, Vanessa Lang wanted her dead, and she's going to pay for it. The defense's opening was weaker. Garrett Pierce tried to paint Vanessa as a victim of her husband's crimes, a woman who'd been manipulated and coerced, but even he seemed to know it wouldn't work. His voice lacked conviction. The first witness was called, a forensic accountant who walked the jury through the financial records. Elena listened, but her mind was elsewhere. On the man in the gray jacket, on Marcus Trent, on the threat still hanging over her head. Brennan sat 3 rows back, his eyes scanning the room constantly. His hand never strayed far from his sidearm. The morning session dragged on. Witness after witness, document after document. By lunch, the case against Vanessa was ironclad. During the recess, Elena stepped outside for air. Brennan followed her to a secure hallway away from the crowd. Anything? She asked. We're still looking for the guy in the gray jacket. No ID yet. Could be Trent, could be a reporter, could be nothing. It wasn't nothing. I know, but we can't arrest someone for looking at you. Elena leaned against the wall. How much longer is this going to take? The trial? 2 weeks? Maybe 3. I meant Trent. Brennan's expression darkened. I don't know, but we're close. I can feel it. So can I. They returned to the courtroom. The afternoon session began. More witnesses, more evidence. Vanessa sat motionless at the defense table, her face a mask. And then, during a break while the judge reviewed an exhibit, Elena's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Enjoy the show. It's the last one you will see. Her blood went cold. She showed it to Brennan immediately. He was on his radio in seconds. Possible threat. Text message to the victim. Trace it now. Elena scanned the courtroom. Everyone looked normal, reporters scribbling notes, spectators watching the proceedings, Vanessa conferring with her lawyer. But someone in this building had just sent that message. Brennan's radio crackled. Text originated from a burner phone. Signals pinging off a tower 3 blocks east. Elena's mind raced. 3 blocks east was an office building, tall, multiple sightlines to the courthouse. He's in the Hartley building, she said. How do you know? Because that's where I'd be. Brennan grabbed her arm. We're leaving, now. No. Elena, if I leave, he disappears again and we're back to square one. You're not bulletproof. I'm wearing a vest, and I'm surrounded by federal agents. If he tries something here, you'll catch him. Brennan looked like he wanted to argue, but he didn't. Instead, he spoke into his radio. All units, possible shooter in the Hartley building. Lock it down, now. The trial continued, but Elena couldn't focus. Her eyes kept drifting to the windows, to the doors, to every shadow and movement. The judge called the next witness, a woman who'd been wrongfully convicted based on evidence planted by Hastings. She testified about losing 3 years of her life, about missing her daughter's childhood, about the trauma that would never fully heal. Elena watched Vanessa's face for any sign of remorse. There was none. The session ended at 5. The judge adjourned until the next morning. People began filing out. Elena stood, her muscles stiff from sitting tensely for hours. Brennan materialized at her side. We swept the Hartley building, he said quietly. Found a room on the 8th floor, window facing the courthouse. Rifle case, empty. Elena's pulse spiked. He was there? He was, but he's gone now. Did you find anything? Prints? DNA? Anything? Nothing. He's a professional. He doesn't leave traces. They walked toward the exit, surrounded by agents. Outside, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the courthouse steps. Elena descended carefully, her eyes scanning the crowd. Reporters shouted questions. She ignored them. They reached the SUV. Brennan opened the door for her. That's when she saw him again. The man in the gray jacket, standing across the street, watching. This time, she was certain. That's him, she said. Brennan followed her gaze. All units, target spotted, gray jacket, west side of the street. Move in. Agents converged from multiple directions. The man saw them coming. He didn't run. He just stood there, hands visible, calm. Too calm. Brennan drew his weapon. On the ground, now! The man complied slowly, kneeling, then lying face down on the pavement. Agents swarmed him, cuffing him, searching him. Elena stayed by the SUV, her heart pounding. One of the agents spoke into his radio. Subject secured, no weapons, running ID now. Brennan kept his gun trained on the man while they worked. A minute passed, then 2. Finally, the agent looked up. Sir, this isn't Marcus Trent. Who is it? Name's Gerald Morrison. He's a process server. He's been trying to deliver a subpoena to one of the witnesses. Brennan lowered his weapon slowly. You're sure? Positive. His credentials check out. Brennan cursed under his breath. He walked over to Morrison and pulled him to his feet. You've been following Elena Vance? Morrison looked terrified. No, I swear. I was just trying to find Patricia Kern. She's supposed to testify tomorrow, and I need to get out of here. Morrison scrambled away, still shaking. Elena felt the adrenaline draining from her system, leaving her exhausted. False alarm. Yeah. Brennan holstered his weapon. Let's get you out of here. They drove to the safe house in silence. Elena stared out the window, watching the city blur past. Somewhere out there, Marcus Trent was planning his next move, and she was running out of time. That night, she couldn't sleep again. She paced the safe house, her mind spinning. Brennan had posted guards outside, but she knew it wouldn't matter. If Trent wanted her dead, he'd find a way. Unless she found him first. At 2 a.m, she pulled out her laptop and started digging deeper. Phone records, property deeds, financial transactions. She cross-referenced everything she could find on Trent with everything she knew about Vanessa's network. And then she found it. A property in Vanessa's name that hadn't been flagged during the initial investigation. A cabin in the mountains, 2 hours north of Morganfield. Purchased through a shell company 12 years ago. Never listed on any tax documents. The perfect hiding place. Elena grabbed her phone and called Brennan. What? He answered, groggy. I found him. Brennan was at the safe house in 20 minutes. Elena showed him what she'd found. This could be nothing, he said, studying the records. Or it could be everything. If we go in and he's not there, we tip our hand. He'll know we're onto him. And if we don't go in and he is there, he keeps planning, keeps waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Brennan rubbed his face. All right. But we do this smart. Full tactical team, drone surveillance first. If there's any sign of activity, we move in. When? Dawn. They assembled the team in a parking lot on the outskirts of town. 12 agents, all heavily armed, all veterans of tactical operations. Brennan briefed them quickly and efficiently. Target is Marcus Trent, 52, armed and dangerous, suspected of conspiracy to commit murder. Location is a remote cabin, limited access roads, lots of tree cover. We go in quiet, secure the perimeter, then breach if we confirm he's inside. The drive took 90 minutes. They parked a mile from the cabin and went the rest of the way on foot. The sun was just beginning to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. The forest was silent except for the crunch of boots on fallen leaves. Brennan deployed the drone. It circled overhead, its camera feeding images back to a tablet he carried. The cabin came into view, small, isolated, surrounded by trees, and there was smoke coming from the chimney. "He's there," Brennan whispered. The team moved into position. Elena stayed back with 2 agents, crouched behind a fallen log 50 yards from the cabin. Brennan gave the signal. The tactical team moved fast and silent, surrounding the cabin. 2 agents positioned themselves at the front door. 2 more at the back. The rest covered the windows. Brennan's voice cut through the radio. "FBI! Marcus Trent! Come out with your hands up!" No response. "This is your last warning! Come out now!" Still nothing. Brennan nodded to the agents at the front door. One of them swung a battering ram, and the door exploded inward. The team poured inside, shouting, movement, then silence. Elena held her breath. Brennan's voice crackled over the radio. "Cabin secure, target not present, repeat. Target not present." Elena's stomach dropped. She stood and walked toward the cabin. Inside, it was clear someone had been living there recently. Food in the fridge, clothes in the closet, a laptop on the table. But no Marcus Trent. Brennan was examining the laptop. "He left in a hurry. This is still powered on. Can you access it?" "Maybe. We'll need a tech team." Elena walked through the cabin, her frustration mounting. They'd been so close, and then she saw it. On the wall, pinned above the fireplace, was a map of Morganfield. Red circles marked the courthouse, the federal building, Mercy General Hospital, and her apartment. Beneath the map was a calendar. Today's date was circled in black marker, and next to it, 2 words: final move. Elena's blood turned to ice. Brennan. He was at her side in seconds. He looked at the calendar and his face went pale. "He's not here because he's already in the city," Elena said. "Doing what?" "Finishing what Vanessa started." They were back in the vehicles and speeding toward Morganfield within minutes. Brennan was on the phone with every law enforcement agency in the state, issuing alerts, mobilizing teams. Elena sat in the passenger seat, her mind racing. If Trent was planning something today, it would be big, public, a statement. And the only place that fit that description was the courthouse. "He's going after the trial," she said. Brennan looked at her. "You think he's going to attack during the proceedings?" "I think he's going to try. We've got security all over that building, and he's had months to plan. He knows our procedures, knows our blind spots. If he wants in, he'll find a way." Brennan's hands tightened on the wheel. "Then we lock it down. No one in or out except authorized personnel. Metal detectors at every entrance. K9 units sweeping for explosives. It won't be enough. It has to be." They arrived back in the city just after 9. The trial was set to resume at 10. Brennan coordinated with courthouse security, while Elena was escorted inside by a phalanx of agents. The building was crawling with law enforcement, uniformed officers, plainclothes detectives, federal agents, K9 units sniffing every corner. If Trent was planning an attack, he'd have to be suicidal to try it now. But Elena had a sinking feeling that suicide might be exactly what he had in mind. The courtroom filled. The judge took the bench. Vanessa was brought in. Elena sat in her usual seat, flanked by agents. Brennan stood near the back, his eyes scanning constantly. The prosecution called its next witness, an FBI agent who testified about the evidence found in the storage unit. Everything seemed normal, too normal. Elena's instincts were screaming at her. Something was wrong. She glanced around the courtroom, reporters, spectators, lawyers. Everyone looked legitimate, But then her eyes landed on a man sitting in the back row, late 50s, suit and tie, glasses. Unremarkable. Except he wasn't watching the witness. He was watching her. Their eyes met, and Elena knew. "Brennan," she said quietly into the mic clipped to her collar. "Back row, left side, dark suit. That's him." Brennan's gaze shifted. He saw the man, spoke into his radio. The man stood and walked calmly toward the exit. Agents moved to intercept, but he was faster. He reached the door, pushed through, and broke into a run. "Suspect fleeing!" Brennan shouted. "All units converge on the north stairwell." Elena was on her feet before anyone could stop her. She pushed past the agents and ran after Trent. Behind her, Brennan was yelling for her to stop. She didn't listen. She hit the stairwell and saw Trent descending 3 steps at a time. She followed, her footsteps echoing in the concrete shaft. He reached the ground floor and burst through the exit into a service corridor. Elena was right behind him. "Marcus Trent!" she shouted. "Stop!" He spun, and suddenly there was a gun in his hand. Elena froze. They stared at each other across 10 feet of empty hallway. "You should have stayed out of this," Trent said. His voice was calm, almost sad. "Your sister destroyed innocent lives. I'm not going to apologize for stopping her. She was protecting our family's legacy." "Your family's legacy is corruption and murder." Trent's expression hardened. "You took everything from us." "I took nothing. You lost it because you earned it." Behind her, she could hear boots pounding down the stairs. Brennan and his team, seconds away. Trent heard it too. His finger tightened on the trigger. "Don't," Elena said. "It's over. You shoot me, they'll kill you. You run, they'll catch you. There's no way out." "There's always a way out." "Not this time." Brennan burst through the stairwell door, weapon raised. "Drop it. Now." Trent didn't move. His gun was still pointed at Elena. "Drop the weapon," Brennan shouted again. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Trent smiled. "She was right about you. You don't quit." "No," Elena said. "I don't." Trent lowered his gun slowly, but instead of dropping it, he turned it toward Brennan. The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space. Brennan fired first. 3 shots, center mass. Trent crumpled to the floor, the gun clattering from his hand. Elena's ears were ringing. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Brennan kicked Trent's weapon away and checked for a pulse. "He's gone." Agents flooded the corridor. Someone was shouting into a radio. Someone else was pulling Elena back, checking her for injuries. She wasn't hurt. Not physically. But as she looked down at Marcus Trent's body, at the blood spreading across the tile floor, she felt something inside her break. It was over. Really, truly over. And the cost had been so much higher than she'd ever imagined. The aftermath moved in slow motion. Statements given, reports filed, media briefings. Elena sat in a federal office for hours, answering the same questions over and over. What did Trent say? What did he do? Did you feel threatened? Yes. She'd felt threatened. She'd felt hunted. And now the hunter was dead. By the time they let her leave, it was well past midnight. Brennan drove her back to the safe house in silence. When they arrived, he turned to her. "You saved my life," he said. "What?" "If you hadn't kept him talking, he would have shot me the second he had a clear angle. You gave me time to react." Elena shook her head. "I wasn't trying to save anyone. I was just talking." "That's how it works sometimes." She got out of the car without responding. Inside, she locked the door and stood in the dark for a long time. Her hands were shaking again. She couldn't make them stop. She'd wanted justice. She'd wanted accountability. She'd gotten both. But she'd also watched a man die 3 feet in front of her, and that was something she'd never forget. The trial resumed 2 days later. Without the threat of Trent looming over everything, the proceedings felt almost anticlimactic. The prosecution rested its case. The defense put up a half-hearted effort, calling character witnesses who tried to humanize Vanessa. But the evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for 6 hours, guilty on all counts. Elena was in the courtroom when the verdict was read. She watched Vanessa's face crumble, watched the marshals lead her away in chains, and she felt nothing. No triumph, no relief, just emptiness. Outside, reporters swarmed. But Elena walked past them without stopping. Brennan and Bat flanked her, clearing a path. They reached the SUV. Elena climbed in and closed her eyes. "Are you okay?" Bat asked. "I don't know." "You should be celebrating. You won." "Did I?" Pat didn't have an answer for that. Vanessa was sentenced 3 weeks later. 45 years in federal prison without possibility of parole. Elena attended the sentencing but didn't speak. She just watched as the judge delivered the verdict and Vanessa was led away one final time. In the hallway afterward, a woman approached her, mid-30s, wearing jeans and a sweatshirt. "Ms. Vance?" Elena turned. "My name is Rachel Torres. My father was one of the 63. He died in prison 2 years ago." Elena's chest tightened. "I'm so sorry. I just wanted to say thank you. He didn't live to see this, but it matters. What you did matters." Elena's throat was too tight to speak. She just nodded. Rachel reached out and squeezed her hand. "Don't let anyone tell you it wasn't worth it." Then she walked away. Elena stood in the hallway for a long time, watching people stream past. Lawyers, victims, families, all of them touched by the same corruption, the same injustice. And she realized something. It had been worth it. Not because of the convictions or the headlines or the reforms, but because people like Rachel's father would never be forgotten. Because the system that had failed them was being forced to change. Because she'd refused to let them win. The months that followed were quieter. The media moved on to other stories. The foundation grew steadily, helping dozens of exonerated prisoners rebuild their lives. Elena threw herself into the work, finding purpose in the small victories. One afternoon, 6 months after Vanessa's sentencing, Elena was working at the foundation office when Pat walked in. "I have something for you," he said. He handed her an envelope. Inside was a letter from the governor's office. She read it twice, not quite believing the words. "They want to appoint you to the State Oversight Commission," Bat said, "for criminal justice reform." Elena looked up. "Are you serious?" "Completely. You'd be helping shape policy at the state level, making sure what happened in Morganfield never happens again." Elena set the letter down. "I'm not a politician." "No, you're something better. You're someone who actually gives a damn." She thought about it for a long time. Then she picked up the letter and read it again. "I'll do it," she said. Pat grinned. "I knew you would." A year after Vanessa's conviction, Elena stood in the state capitol building, surrounded by legislators and advocates and families of the wrongfully convicted. The governor was signing the Accountability and Reform Act into law, a sweeping piece of legislation that established independent oversight of law enforcement, mandatory review of convictions, and protections for whistleblowers. It was named after the 63 people whose lives had been stolen. Elena watched the signing ceremony from the front row, her hands folded in her lap. When it was over, people stood and applauded. The governor shook her hand. "None of this would have happened without you. It wasn't just me." "Maybe not, but you started it." That evening, Elena returned to her apartment. It was the first time in weeks she'd been home before dark. She poured herself a glass of wine and sat by the window, looking out at the city. Somewhere out there, people were sleeping safely because of the work she'd done. Families were whole again. Lives were being rebuilt. It wasn't perfect. It would never be perfect. But it was better. Her phone buzzed. A text from Clara Mendez. "Miguel got a job offer today. Construction company. Good pay. He starts Monday. Thank you for everything." Elena smiled. She typed back, "Tell him congratulations. He earned it." She set the phone down and finished her wine. The next morning, she went back to work at Mercy General, her first shift in 3 weeks. The familiar chaos of the ER felt grounding after months of courtrooms and press conferences. During a break, one of the younger nurses pulled her aside. "I just wanted to say, what you did was incredible. You changed everything." Elena shook her head. "I just refused to quit." "That's more than most people would do." Maybe. But Elena had learned something during those long months of fighting. That courage wasn't about being fearless. It was about being terrified and doing it anyway. That justice wasn't handed down from above. It was fought for, inch, by people who refused to accept that the system was broken beyond repair, and that sometimes one person really could make a difference. Not because they were special, but because they were stubborn enough to see it through. 2 years after the night she'd been pulled over, Elena stood on the steps of the Justice Accountability Center, cutting the ribbon on a new wing dedicated to legal aid for the wrongfully convicted. The building was packed. Families, advocates, former prisoners who'd been exonerated. Miguel Mendez stood in the front row with his sister, both of them smiling. Brennan was there too, standing off to the side, watching the crowd with the same alert intensity he'd had the night they raided the warehouse. When the ceremony ended, he walked over. "You did good," he said. "We did good." "Fair enough." They stood in silence for a moment, watching people filter into the building. "You ever think about what would have happened if you'd just taken the settlement?" Brennan asked. Elena considered it. Every day. "Regret it?" "Not even a little." Brennan smiled. "Good." That night, Elena went home and pulled out a box she'd kept hidden in her closet. Inside were mementos from the past 2 years, the dashcam footage on a USB drive, newspaper clippings, photos of the 63, and at the bottom, a handwritten note from Rachel Torres. "My father would be proud." "I know I am." Elena read it one more time, then put everything back in the box and closed the lid. She didn't need to look at it anymore, because she'd lived it, survived it, and come out the other side stronger. The system that had tried to destroy her was being rebuilt from the ground up. The people who'd profited from corruption were behind bars, and she was still standing, not as a victim, not as a survivor, but as someone who'd changed the world simply by refusing to let it break her. 3 years after that night on Ashford Boulevard, Elena received an invitation to speak at a national conference on wrongful convictions. She almost declined. Public speaking still made her uncomfortable. But then she thought about all the people who didn't have a voice, who were still fighting to be heard. And she said yes. The auditorium was massive, thousands of people, advocates, lawyers, families, journalists. She stood at the podium and looked out at the sea of faces. "I'm not a hero," she began. "I'm a nurse who got pulled over on the way home from work and refused to accept that being framed for a crime I didn't commit was just how things were." Her voice was steady, confident. "People ask me all the time if it was worth it, and the answer is yes. Not because we won, not because people went to prison, but because we proved that ordinary people can stand up to corruption and win. We proved that the system can be changed when enough people refuse to accept it as it is." She paused, letting the words sink in. "If there's one thing I want you to take from this, it's that you don't have to be special to make a difference. You just have to care enough to fight, and to keep fighting even when it seems impossible, especially when it seems impossible." The applause was thunderous. After the speech, people lined up to speak with her, students who wanted advice, advocates who wanted to collaborate, families who just wanted to say thank you. One man, elderly and frail, clasped her hand with surprising strength. "My son was one of the 63, he said, tears streaming down his face. "He's home now, building a life, and it's because of you." Elena's eyes burned. "I'm glad he's home. You gave us hope when we had none left." Elena hugged him, and the man held on like she was the only thing keeping him upright. Later that night, Elena sat in her hotel room, exhausted but content. Her phone buzzed. A text from Bot. Saw the speech online. "You crushed it." "Thanks. You know you're changing lives, right? I'm just doing what needs to be done. That's what makes you special." She set the phone down and looked out at the city lights below. Somewhere out there, people were fighting the same battles she'd fought, facing the same injustices, wondering if anyone cared. And she wanted them to know someone did. She cared. And she wasn't going to stop fighting until every single person who'd been wronged had a chance at justice. Because that's what this had always been about. Not revenge, not glory. Just the simple, stubborn belief that people deserved better. And the willingness to fight for it, no matter the cost. 5 years after the night that changed everything, Elena sat in her office at the Justice Accountability Center, reviewing case files. The foundation had grown beyond anything she'd imagined. Offices in 4 states, a staff of 60, hundreds of exonerations secured. But the work was never done. There was always another case, another innocent person waiting for someone to believe them. Her phone rang. An unfamiliar number. "This is Elena." "Ms. Vance, my name is David Park. I was arrested 8 years ago for a crime I didn't commit. I've been in prison ever since, and I just saw your interview on the news. Elena grabbed a pen. Tell me everything. As she listened to David's story, another planted evidence case, another corrupt cop, another life destroyed, she felt the familiar fire ignite in her chest. She'd thought it was over, but it wasn't. It never would be. And that was okay, because she'd learned that justice wasn't a destination. It was a constant, exhausting, necessary fight, and she was built for it. I'm going to help you, she said, but I need you to be patient. This is going to take time. I've waited 8 years. I can wait a little longer. Elena hung up and added David's name to the growing list of cases. Then she got to work. Because somewhere in Morganfield, a woman who'd once been pulled over for nothing and nearly had her life destroyed was now the reason dozens of people were walking free. She'd been underestimated, dismissed, targeted, and she'd won anyway. Not because she was fearless, but because when they tried to break her, she broke them instead. And that made all the difference.